growth of your no-code app is not certain, and the last thing you want to do is spend all of your time and resources building it out only to launch it and watch it kind of fizzle out and die on the other side. That's why in this video, we're going to go through a simple but powerful model to help you turn your no-code app idea into a business. Now, make sure you stick around until the end because this model has 3 steps for you to follow. Get each one of these right, and you'll be setting yourself and your app up for success. Get them wrong, and you will struggle on the other side of your launch. If you're new here, I'm Kristen, co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps. We help non-technical entrepreneurs build custom apps so they can launch their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses all without coding. We publish new videos to help you achieve this every single week, so subscribe to this channel if you want more of that. Today, we're going to talk through something I call the value ladder. Now, this ladder has 3 rungs for you to climb up in order to achieve success. The 3 rungs stand for different phases you'll go through with your app. The first is measure, the second is convey, and the third is receive. Now, whether you've already started the development of your app or not, these are things you need to be thinking about. You should not wait until after you launch. So if you are still in development or if you're in the planning stages, now is the time to go through this value ladder. And we're going to go ahead and jump over to the whiteboard so we can go through it together. This is our value ladder. Now, what we're trying to do is go from the bottom rung, or really just the ground level, where you're at your app idea stage only. And we're going to the top where you have a valuable solution for your users. Now, this is important because a lot of people just think about their product when in reality, you want to be providing a valuable solution and really an outcome for your users, and they have to see the value in that solution as well. So we're going to break down each of those rungs as we're calling them, and also talk about how they affect your users and how they affect you as the founder or as the business. Let's jump into the first one, which is measure. We're going to frame this as the obstacle that I see people come up against, and that is really having no value metric for their app. In order to go from idea to valuable solution for your users, you actually have to have a way to measure value. Otherwise, how are you going to know whether your users are achieving success with your app and how you are achieving success with your app as a business? So before you go any further into your app's development, you need to identify this value metric, and it's going to come up all throughout your app's lifecycle, really, and just throughout the growth of your business. But in order to come up with a value metric, you first have to understand the problem your app is solving. So think about your app less of a solution and a set of features. So don't think about what it does. Think about what it solves. So what is the problem you are aiming to solve for your users? And what is the outcome that your app will help users achieve? Now, that outcome is where the value lies. And you want to make sure as much as you can that that value is measurable in some way. And that becomes your value metric. So in other words, the more a user uses your app, the more of X they will achieve, right? X being that value metric. So think about how you can fill that in for yourself. By having a defined value metric in place, you're going to be able to measure your user's success. Now, on the flip side, having a value metric is also going to be able to help you drive your business's success as well. Because if you don't have a North Star, so to speak, a tangible goal that you are aiming for with your business, then you're going to have a hard time steering your operations and decision making. A value metric can help steer your operations, which will help your business see more success. With a specific value metric in place, your users will be able to see more success, because if they are not seeing or achieving a high enough value metric, then you're going to know right off the bat that you need to make changes on the user side. Those changes might come in the form of new features or different features, iterations, maybe just different onboarding or communication with your users, or teaching them how to use your product. But either way, if you're able to measure success with your users, that is going to enable you to make your product better for them, because you'll know when they're not being successful. I do want to go through a specific example so you can tie this to a more real life scenario. So for the entire value ladder, let's use the example of an email marketing service. Okay, so with an email marketing service like MailChimp or Convertkit or ActiveCampaign, any of those, a value metric might be the number of contacts a user has on their list. So if you think about what would signify value for a user, well, the volume of contacts on an email list is going to be valuable for them. The more they have on their email list, that means the bigger the audience they have and the more people they can reach. Let's actually go over to Convertkit. I'm on their landing page right now, and Convertkit markets themselves as an email marketing service for creators. Okay, and so if we look at the value metric of having a growing list size or a growing number of contacts on a list, subscribers, that being the value metric, we can kind of see how Convertkit uses that as theirs and dictates the features that they have and how they price their product. So let's go through a few things. I'm on their pricing page right now. And look, you can see right here, they are helping you gauge or predict your pricing based on how many email subscribers you have. So clearly that is something of value for their users, because their users are creators, maybe they are bloggers or artists or what have you, small businesses, and growth in their business directly relates to growth of subscribers. The bigger the audience they have, the more they'll be able to sell their products or services, the more growth they will have as creatives or business owners. Okay, so at the core, a tool like Convertkit or any email marketing service really just lets you take a list of subscribers and send them emails. But by thinking of problem and solution versus just product, that's where we can start to actually gauge the value metric better and see how we can influence that value metric. So the problem for Convertkit users or their target market might be growing an audience, selling to an audience, and reaching their audience. Maybe they're having trouble with those three things, and so they're struggling as a business. Whereas on the other side, the outcome would be consistent sales with their audience through emails, which is something that they can leverage on a one-to-many basis, right? The product is in the middle. It's just the solution. So you can see that if let's click into features here. So Convertkit has things like landing pages, create a landing page in minutes. Now, that's not sending emails. That's not, that doesn't have to do with the number of contacts on a list necessarily, but it does help to drive that. Okay, because if a person can create a landing page really quickly and have an opt-in or an email sign-up form, then they can start to grow the size of their contact database within Convertkit. So Convertkit is helping the user it's providing them with tools to help them grow their subscriber list, which is directly, of course, going to help Convertkit, because the more subscribers you have, the higher the pricing goes. Okay, so let's look at a couple more of these. So we have our email designer, we have some automations, obviously the email marketing. So essentially they're making the sending process of the emails, or the creation process rather, a lot easier so that these creators or these users can more easily reach their audience. And thus sell to their audience. That first rung is measure. You have to have something to measure as it relates to your user success and your business success so that you can consistently stay steered toward that North Star. So if you don't have that value metric identified, then you're not going to have clarity in that area. The second rung is convey. And the obstacle that I see people running into is that they can't convey the value of their app correctly, concisely, and in a way that users understand. When I'm having conversations with founders in their early stages, and I ask them what problem their app solves, 95% of the time, they respond by describing their app and its feature set. Now, that makes sense because if you're thinking about the problem and maybe you don't have a crystal clear definition of that problem, then instead you're going to kind of revert to thinking about just your product in and of itself and what it helps users do. But that's not the question. The question is, what problem are you solving? So in order for users to understand the value of your app, they have to understand what problem your app is solving and what outcome it is helping them achieve. Otherwise, they won't be able to connect the value. They might still see value in your app just as it relates to the feature set you have, but they won't see the full value. And you want them to understand not just what your app does, but how your app is going to impact them as a person in their lives or in their business. Going back to our email marketing service example, if you were to ask me what problem my app solves, if I was building an email marketing service and I just said, well, I'm building an app that lets people email their users with really well-designed emails, then someone might see the value in being able to do that, but it's not going to really differentiate your product and it's not going to resonate too much. But if we actually go back to Convertkit, we can look through this from a different lens. So with an email marketing service, if I were to instead say that, my target market, they are small businesses or solo founders who are struggling to get themselves up off the ground, and they really want to create an online business and make a living online, right? So that talks about their problem and it talks about what they're trying to achieve. And it doesn't really talk about the product at all. It doesn't talk about just enabling people to send emails, but that's what the product does. It takes them from problem to outcome. And you can see Convertkit does exactly that on their landing page. Convertkit helps you grow your audience, foster your community, and earn a living online. Now, talking about the ability to send emails from an app and talking about earning a living online, those are two really different things. And more importantly, they convey vastly different levels of value. If you can't properly convey the value of your app, then on a user side, you can lead to product confusion. You may end up bringing in the wrong user type and really just experiencing a high churn rate, which obviously isn't good for you as a business, but it's not very helpful for your users either because they're going to come onto your platform, spend time onboarding and setting up and using your product, only to realize it's not for them after all. And that's just a waste of time. So we have Convertkit, again, which we've already been looking at, and it's the creator marketing platform, right? It helps you grow your audience, foster your community, earn a living online. So clearly this is for smaller people in terms of business, right? People who are probably just starting out and they are trying to kickstart their initial growth. Now, if we look at a different tool, which is still an email marketing service, it still allows you to store, grow your contact list and send them emails. If we look at something like Entreport, for example, and there's tons of them, this is now they do obviously have different features, but in terms of core features, really similar. It's an email marketing service, right? But they convey their value differently. They are the sales and marketing platform for growing businesses. So while Convertkit might be on one end of the spectrum, people who are just starting up and in their really early stages, well, Entreport is clearly conveying their value to the next step for growing businesses. And there are email marketing services for enterprise businesses, and they all convey value in different ways. But if you didn't understand how to convey your value correctly in the first place, then you might have someone who is right for a platform like Convertkit come on to a platform like Entreport and really just not be able to use the product effectively and therefore not have a good experience. Or it could be vice versa. Someone who really should be using a product like Entreport, but who goes to Convertkit instead and therefore just doesn't have a good experience because they can't reach their full potential with that product. So when you can't properly convey the value of your app, it can lead to a lot of product confusion, which we've just talked through. And on the business side, really this just can lead to low or no conversions, or like we said, high churn, which is something you really want to avoid with your app. The third rung is received. And the growth obstacle that I see people running into is that the value is not received by their users early and quickly. So we've gone from measuring the value to conveying the value. And now we have to look at the value being received. So that growth obstacle is when the value is not received either early enough or quickly enough by users on the other side of them converting into a user. This is obviously looking at a later step, right? You have to be able to measure the value, you have to be able to convey it. And now we're looking at the other side. When users have signed up for your app, maybe they're in a free trial period, or maybe they're paying, they need to experience the value that you have identified. They need to experience that metric early on as quickly as possible in their initial onboarding, because you want to prove the value. I see a lot of people build their apps and just kind of let users come on board and leave them to their own devices. And it's really not very helpful. You want to be the guide for your users. And just because you've created a really great app doesn't mean that they're going to be able to see how great it is just by coming on. So you as the developer, right, if you're building your app with no-code tools, then you are really, really close to your app. That means at this point, it's super intuitive to you. You know exactly what it's supposed to do and exactly how to use it. You also know its quirks and all of that. Your users don't. They might come on having never used even a product that's similar to yours before. And therefore, you really have to guide them and prompt them to take certain actions that will lead to them achieving that value metric that you have identified. So don't just leave it to users to figure out on their own, and don't expect them to take the time to figure it out on their own. People are busy. People have short attention spans. So if you leave it to them, chances are they're not going to achieve that value. If a user can't come on board your app and really early on experience the value, then this is just going to take you back to that high churn rate. And this is going to, I mean, it's such a stall on your growth. You don't want to have high churn. And really that just leads us into, on the business side, kind of like a growth slog, right? Your growth feels like a slog, like your feet are stuck in the mud, like for every 2 steps forward, you take 1 step back because of that high churn rate. And you just don't want to experience that early on or at any point with your app and business. How can you make sure that that value is received quickly? Well, a lot of this has to do with your onboarding. And again, just measuring the value metric in the first place. So you want to make sure that when users are coming on board your app, one of the first things that you're having them do is related to that value metric. So with the example of our email marketing service, if the value metric is the number of contacts on a person's email list, well, one of the first things that you might have them do when they're onboarding is to import their existing subscribers, right? Because if they immediately have a database of subscribers on your email marketing service app, then immediately they have some sort of level of that value metric achieved. And so if they can't really do anything else, or they can't get the full value of your app, for example, growing their business without that thing in place, well, then you want to do everything you can to make sure they do that thing right at the start. So for an email marketing service, they might measure or track rather if and when someone imports their contacts. That might be a big part of the onboarding process. They probably are going to offer services or documentation around how to help people do that to make it as easy and seamless as possible for them. Now, I'm not saying that you should have the perfect onboarding for your pilot launch, right? Your very initial launch where you're just initially validating your product. You don't want to go overboard on the onboarding here, because the reality is you're going to be working hands-on with your users, right? So don't spend time creating a bunch of scalable things to track and measure within your app before you've even validated that pilot product. Wait until later. But the value metric itself, and with your onboarding, even if it's manual during that pilot launch, these are things that you should be looking for. To kind of drive this point home, let's go back to our examples. In looking at Convertkit, if you scroll down to their footer, let's find it here. There is a free migration service, right? So if the value metric is number of subscribers, then they're going to want to increase or sort of experience or put that value into place as early as possible. And look, they have a really easy way to get someone set up on Convertkit and go ahead and import their initial contacts. And I bet you if we go to Ontraport, they do something similar. So let's just scroll down here. So we won't go through the features or anything like that, but let's see here. There we go. It's easy to switch to Ontraport. So they say here, we get it, you've already got other tools. We'll make the transition easy. And you can see they have clearly something set up to go ahead and import your contacts in and achieve that first value metric. And we didn't actually look at the pricing on Ontraport yet, but we can feel safe that it has something to do with list size, right? So right here, we have contacts, okay? So we can see that that value metric is right there, because ultimately that is going to signify growth within the business. Whether you have started your no-code apps development or not, these are things that you need to be thinking about, and certainly before you launch. Now, if you're in that stage of planning or early development and you want to make sure you get these things right and you want to create a valuable solution, not just a feature set, we have an extended training. It's a workshop that you can go through over at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. It's an entirely free training that is going to help you go from that idea stage to starting to put some of the pieces into place. It's going to help you scope out your product and make sure you're building the most valuable features first, launching the most valuable features first, getting the right feedback so that you can focus on providing that value to your users and ultimately growing your business. So head to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. Join us on that. It's going to be super helpful as you move forward with your app. And if you like this video, if you found value in it, give us a like down below. It's really helpful in helping us provide value to more people who are looking to get into the no-code space and grow their own businesses. All right, I hope this was helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.